So with both parts clamped into place, you can really get the full effect. But here's the challenge. How do you hold these aluminum parts to this steel frame? Today I'm working with a lowrider bicycle frame, and my plan is to make a sheet metal panel that goes into this triangular opening and put some cool holes in it. So the place to start is by making a pattern. So I have a piece of heavy paper here that I'll fit into place. I'll get it aligned with the down tube in front, clamp that into place, put another clamp back here, and now the first step is to mark the curvature of the top tube onto this panel. So I'll use a felt tip marker for this. I'll just reach into that opening and put a curved line on the paper. So I'm going to trim this now. And now we'll fit it back into place and see how well that curve matches. Looks like the fit is just about perfect. So now I can mark the bottom edge of this for trimming. And I'll mark along the bottom side of the bottom tube. Now we can trim on that line. Now we'll fit this into place. It looks like the fit is excellent. So now I want to think about how many holes I'm going to have and what size they'll be. So let's start with the largest hole. Just by eye, I'm going to position this so that the space here and the space here and the space here is just about equal. Now we'll go to the next size hole, and again we'll space that so the spacing here and here and here is just about equal. We'll go to the next one, and again we want to equalize the space here and here and here. I'm just going by eye, and then the next one goes in place here. Everything's looking great so far. And the last hole can go just about here. So I'm going to do just a little bit of fine-tuning now to even out the spacing. And I'm just doing this by eye, but if you're careful you can do a pretty darn good job by eye. And of course if you want to measure it you can. So I'm pretty happy with that layout. Now I'm going to use an awl to mark the center of each of these holes. Just put a little mark into our master pattern so I know where the center of the hole is. And then the next step is to mark the hole locations on the pattern. Before we actually cut the metal, I want to make sure that I like this hole layout in the bicycle frame. So I've got the pattern clamped into place, and I really like that whole layout. I think everything is just the way I wanted it to be. So now we're ready to transfer this pattern onto a sheet of aluminum. So I found a piece of scrap metal just the right size for this piece, and I'll use masking tape to position the pattern on the aluminum sheet so it can't shift. And then I'll use a center punch, an automatic center punch, to lay out the center of each hole. Then I'll use a Sharpie marker to lay out the perimeter. Now we can trim this piece to size. There are many ways I could cut this piece of metal. I'm going to use a bandsaw because it's fast and it doesn't distort the metal in any way. So the cutting is done. The next thing I'll do is to sand the edges to clean them up. Then I'll make the pilot holes for the punch and flare dies. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch diameter rotor-broach annular cutter to make the pilot holes in this panel. So now we can punch and flare the holes. I'm using the Mittler Brothers punch and flare dies. So we'll get the female die set up in the vise. And this takes a lot of force, so I need to tighten the vise. That should do it. And it's always good to use a little lubrication on both the threads of the bolt and on the washer. Then we'll assemble these parts. Okay, I can feel that's bottomed out now, so I'll snug it up just a little bit more and then release it. Then we can pull this apart. And we'll tap the male die out. So as you can see, that just does a beautiful job. So for the 2 larger sizes, I'm actually going to use a hydraulic press because it's faster. But if you don't have a hydraulic press, the draw bolt technique works fine with the 2 larger sizes as well. So with both parts clamped into place, you can really get the full effect. I think it's going to be quite lovely. But here's the challenge. How do you hold these aluminum parts to this steel frame? In some cases, you might think of welding brackets onto the frame, but since it's chrome plated, I don't want to do that. We could drill holes in the frame and put threaded fasteners in the holes, but I don't want to do that for a couple of reasons. One is that frames on bicycles are actually pretty highly stressed, and if you put a hole in it, that's a stress riser. So over a long time, this stress and bouncing could cause a crack to happen. So I've devised a way to hold these into place without doing any welding or without drilling any holes in the frame. Let's take a look. So I'm going to remove the near side. So there's a certain distance between these panels. My plan is to use spacers between the far side and the near side. And I plan to put spacers in several key locations. We will have one down here, one up here, one in the very back, one at the top, and one at the bottom. Where I position the spacers is crucial because if I put this spacer right up in this top corner, that will prevent the panels from moving forward and moving up. And if I put a spacer in the rear area, that will prevent the panel from moving up or from moving back. But we still need to keep the panels from moving down. We don't have a way of doing that yet. So there will be a spacer inside the panels here. My plan is to use another little short spacer on the outside, which will bear against the top of this small diameter tube. So this little extension will prevent the panel from moving down here, and in a like manner, we will have another little extension here that will prevent the rear of this from moving down. So with 5 spacers, we can prevent this from moving back or forth or up or down, simply making 5 spacers. And the bottom 3 will have these little extensions attached to them. So the plan for the spacer is to take a piece of 1/2 inch aluminum stock and to put 1/4-20 holes in it. I have a lathe, so it's not too hard to make parts like this. If you don't have a lathe, you can actually buy parts like this. They're called standoffs. And I'll put a link below that shows you where you can buy standoffs. So that's the plan. So I'm going to remove the near side again. And we're going to start by locating the hole needed to put the spacer in this top corner. So here's a 1/4 inch transfer punch that's a perfect fit inside this 1/2-inch tube with an 1/8-inch wall, all I need to do is to position this in the corner, tap this with a hammer, and then that mark will be the center of the hole for the screw that holds the spacer into place. So I'm using a punch here to make the hole. The punch makes a very clean hole. Of course, if you don't have a punch like this, you could certainly drill the hole. But the punch does such a great job. So there's our hole, and the next thing I want to do is to use this piece to lay out a hole in exactly the same position on the other panel. I'll put a little block of wood under this panel, line them up perfectly, then put the transfer punch through the first hole and mark the second hole. And now I'm ready to punch the hole in the second piece. So now that we have holes in both pieces, I'll assemble these on the bike and we can do the layout for the next hole. So everything looks great so far. I'm going to pull the near side off and we'll mark the location of this hole. So again, the alignment comes from this piece of 1/2-inch diameter tubing. I'm going to get this aligned just so, and then with the transfer punch, I'll tap a mark into the panel. And that's exactly where the next hole needs to go. So let's punch the holes now. So everything's fitting great so far. So I'm going to pull this panel off and we'll mark the hole location for the bottom front corner. Again, I'll use this tube to guide the transfer punch. So I want to make sure it's plumb and level. We'll put the transfer punch into place, double check everything, and then tap this with a hammer. Great, so I'm ready to punch this hole, and I'll transfer that hole to the other panel and punch it at the same time. So everything's looking great so far, and there's 2 more screw holes left to go. So you can see I've made marks on the aluminum. That's the location I've chosen, and the way I determined where the screws would go is I just moved this little spacer until it looked to be centered between these 2 holes. And that looks like the perfect location on the bottom, and this looks like the perfect location on top. And then I transferred these marks onto the frame of the bike. So let's pull this aluminum panel off, and we can lay out our last 2 holes. So we'll do this the same way. I'll put the transfer punch inside this piece of 1/2-inch aluminum tubing. Then I'll get this centered on that mark I've made. Make sure that it's seated properly on the aluminum and tap it. And we'll do exactly the same on the top. So we'll punch these holes and put everything together. So the project is finished, and I'm just delighted with how well it came out. I love this pattern of holes that gets smaller as it goes toward the rear, and I think it really accentuates the design of the bicycle frame. And of course, putting the radius on the edge of the holes is the finishing touch. I was a little concerned about how well this mounting system might work. I wasn't sure if it would rattle or be loose, but I can't budge this a fraction of an inch, and it doesn't rattle at all. So that came out super well. So think about how you might apply this type of construction to many other projects. Could be a motorcycle, automobile, airplane, boat, who knows. But it's a great way to build things and a great way to add style to your projects. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and that you learned something valuable from it. I'll be posting more things on YouTube in the weeks and months to come, and I hope you'll subscribe. So until next time, this is Ron Covell signing off. Please consider becoming a patron to help support my channel. Click the link above to learn more.